I think, Sarah, the real issue was, were they voting for coverage or were they voting for scrutiny of drug prices? I would volunteer to say that they were in favor of drug coverage. And in that regard, the industry has always been pro-patients, pro-drug coverage. In fact, the coverage for seniors has gone up dramatically since Part D came around, and the industry worked very hard to bring that about.
But you saw the number I just showed. Costs are rising. No matter what it is, it's that people are spending more money. I mean, it's an economic concern at its core.
It's a real issue, and we probably could reduce the overall cost by about 20 or 30%. But even in the countries where the costs are lower than ours, in every country of the world, costs are going up because there's innovation and people are getting older. But you're right. I think through better work, we can probably get our costs down by 20 or 30%.
Better work means?
Means working at the whole system. Better regulatory frameworks for innovation, better scrutiny of drug prices by the market, more transparency. For example, if a generic costs $1, why is the consumer paying $3 or $4? Those kinds of questions. And also, the cost of litigation is an outlier in this country compared to any other country of the world. So there are lots of other issues.
And yet, Bill, we had all sorts of healthcare policy analysts on yesterday saying that you see the major rally in the sector because split government means nothing's going to actually get done. And even if there is some consensus that drug prices are too high and something needs to be done about it, that doesn't necessarily mean both parties will agree on how. What's your take on the likelihood of any legislation here?
Well, I think if President Trump wanted to get it done with the Democrats and Senator Klobuchar and others who are promoting it, they could do something on drug prices. The big flaw in Obamacare is they said the government couldn't negotiate with the drug companies. But I don't think that's the real issue, Sarah. I think we were moving steadily under Andy Slavitt at CMS towards pay away from fee-for-service and to pay for value. And that's kind of stopped now. And as long as they're in fee-for-service, you pay doctors and hospitals to do more. They're going to do more procedures, more drugs, more surgeries, and more patients. And I think we've got to get to pay for value. And I also think our institutions today are focusing on disease care. We got to get to health care. The population is getting sicker in America, and costs are going to rise inexorably until we address that issue. No one's willing to address that. I think where you're going to see it now is in the private sector. And I think we've got to, you're going to see is the rise of healthcare information companies focusing on clinical information. And we're not going to do a Facebook in healthcare, I can tell you that, because the information is so confidential. What you're going to see organizations like United Health Group, which was way up yesterday, that's because of not insurance, that's because of Optum Health, because they've got the information. I'm on the board of Mayo, where we have huge amounts of information. That clinical insight information is what's going to turn it around and having patients live healthier and stay healthier, as well as, I'll give you an example. My wife had breast cancer 20 years ago. Millions of women have breast cancer every year. We can't just give them chemotherapy that works in less than half of the cases. We've got to use individualized medicine. How do we get to that point where the chemotherapy is only applied when we know 95% effectiveness? And I think we're going to have to change our treatments using information. Those insights are there with big data going to the individual patients. Artificial intelligence is going to tell us a lot. So that's the big opportunity in healthcare that I see. I think pharma would do great. I think they'll have great drugs. Biopharma is going to have great things. Medical technology is going to be very strong. But to address the real issues, we're going to have a huge new market of clinical information.
So that doesn't involve regulation at all.
Yeah.
No, it's not about regulation. It's not about Amazon
private
either.
sector initiatives.
Amazon's going to disintermediate, Sarah. That's what they're going to do. They're going to disintermediate the drug system. They should. Fred's right. It isn't $1 hiked up to $3. It's 5 cents that the pharmaceutical company does for a generic, and then all these middlemen. And I think that's got to be disintermediated. But that can be done through private enterprise. It doesn't have to be done through government regulation.
Is there a point where, Fred, where scrutiny on pricing hurts innovation at the margin? Can you think of a good example where that has happened?
Oh, it can easily hurt innovation. If you go back 20 years, there was a lot of scrutiny on the HIV drugs pricing. Fortunately, we got the protease inhibitors in 1995, but had there not been so much pressure on industry, many companies literally walked away because it was a no-win. If you got something great, people wanted it for free. If you didn't get anything great, you are no good because you didn't do your R&D. So it's very important that we be very sensitive. You're dealing with a 10 to 15-year investor psyche cycle, 10-year cycle, versus a 2-year cycle that a politician has, or a much shorter cycle that a bureaucrat might have. It's just a disconnect that needs to be managed very carefully.
I agree with Fred, Carl, and I think, you know, they had a medical device tax of 3% on revenues. It was basically a tax on innovation, and that pulled a lot of people back in that area, and finally the last Congress got rid of it. That was a big step because there's tremendous amount that can be done in that field as well. So I agree with Fred. We've got to focus on innovation.
So Bill, just stepping aside from healthcare for a moment, you know, we're all trying to figure out what a split Congress actually means. Should CEOs be excited about that prospect of polarization in the government? CEO confidence levels were actually running pretty high before the midterm elections.
I think they're still high. They got the tax bill they wanted. The corporate tax has been fixed. Now they're going to go full speed ahead. The thing they're not going to do is back away from globalization. They can't. All these, you're talking about the pharma companies, these are all global companies. We're going to move ahead with globalization, and people are going to produce what they want to produce, Sarah. They're not going to back down. They'll give some lip service to it. But I think, in general, confidence in the CEOs is high because they're running their businesses well today. They're creating good earnings, and they're going to keep going, and they're not going to be deflected by the political winds. Those who do will pay a big price. But those who stay clear about whether, and by the way, you're going to see CEOs speaking out more on these public issues, and often in opposition to what the politicians are doing. And that's a good thing. They have a lot of courage to do that, and I hope they'll continue doing that. So CEOs today are in a very, very good position to make a positive impact on public policy, not just behind the scenes,
sort of a
but
trend.
in front of the camera.
Fred, we'll give you the last word. The reason I asked about confidence is, do you expect that this outcome will impact hiring and spending plans?
Oh, absolutely. I think the fact that it's a divided situation creates a little more investor confidence that no mischief is going to occur, at least for the next 2 years. And more importantly, as Bill said, it's a very good time for innovation. Never before have you seen the convergence of 3 or 4 major forces: digital, the genome, the microbiome. There are new things happening every day. And also, I just add to Bill's excellent points, the voice of the consumer, the voice of the patient. Patients have now so much power because they have access to information. And that's going to be a very important part of the future healthcare ecosystem. They are going to be in charge. They will decide the doctor. A lot of them are going to know a lot more about their situation when they go and see the doctor. So information is going to make the consumers very empowered.